So we've been talking about scales now, and particular major scales. So we know how to figure out a major scale. So given any pitch, you should be able to find the major scale around it, right? And what that means is that if I said F, if I said the pitch is F, write a major scale. Using that whole step and half step pattern, you should be able to do that. Now, if you've been following along in the worksheets in this class, you will have done that, and you might do a little more of it in the next worksheet because it's important to know. The next big concept we need to wrap our heads around is how these scales relate to the key of the song and what exactly it means to be in a key. So let's talk about that quickly. We're going to talk about key signatures in the next chunk, and that's an important concept. But before we get into key signatures, I want to spend just a minute talking about what it means to be in key. So what we've looked at here, for example, is in this part, we're using a C major scale. In this part, we're using a G major scale. What we might do to figure out the key that it's in is take kind of one step back and look at the whole song and see if we can figure out where that whole song is. So let me pull up this whole tune and see if we can do it. So can we figure out one key that this whole song is in? Sometimes that's possible. A lot of the time that's possible, actually. So the key is a little bit bigger in scope than just the scale. The scale is more of like for these 4 bars, I'm using this scale, and for these 4 bars, I'm using this scale. But all 8 of those bars might be in a single key. So an entire song might be in one key, but in different sections, it might go into different scales, right? So the key can be a little bit bigger in scope. Now, the key can change within a song, and it does quite often, or in any piece of music. In this one that we're looking at right now, I can see here that this first part is kind of in the key of G. So in this section, I might look at it and say, there's some things that don't quite fit in the key of G, but most things that do. So they're using a different scale here, then it goes back to some G stuff here. So 2 different scales, probably all in the key of G, really. Here we're back to using C scales, little bit of G scales here, kind of a D scale here, so something a little different, and then resolving to a C scale here. So this whole thing, we could say it might be in the key of G altogether, or we might call it in the key of C altogether. It's a little bit of a judgment call at that point. But the point is, it's using several different scales, and they can change all over the place, and the chords will be changing all over the place. The key is a slightly bigger concept that tries to govern the whole piece and doesn't change as often as you would think. I encounter some people when they're just learning this stuff that think that when a chord changes, it's the same as a key changing, which is not true. Chords change all the time. Your default should be to assume the key is not changing, but sometimes it does change, and we'll look at cases like that. So just remember, if there's a hierarchy, the scale that's being used is a little bit lower on the totem pole than the key that we're in. So key is kind of more of a big picture thing. That being said, let's next look at key signatures, how to figure those out and how important they are and how they work for us. Off we go.